As entrepreneurs, there's a reason why we decided to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to tell the stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. On today's podcast, I'm speaking with Andrew Dewar. So, Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it. Awesome name, by the way.
Thank you.
I just want to throw it out there. But you have this really interesting origin story. As I'm going through the background and prepping for our episode today, you have these two very divergent skill sets that I think really, when brought together, are going to be incredibly powerful. So I'm really, really looking forward to chatting with you today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Andrew. And yes, I agree. Great name. Big fan of it. Big fan.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. So I know we heard in the intro kind of what you do. But what I'd like you to do is go very high level through what your ninja skill is now. What you've developed at this point.
So my skill was always solving problems. I was the kid at like 3 years old that would solve puzzles. Like I would sit down and do like 1,000-piece puzzle when I was very, very, very young. So I always kind of looked at things as puzzles, and then somehow got into accounting, and that was a terrible decision to make in grade 5 to follow through on. But here we are, and my skill set is being able to talk with somebody and listen to their words, how they're saying things, what they're saying things, tuning in and figuring out where their blocks might be, and then kind of showing them in a nice, gentle way that these are some things that you are exhibiting that you might not be aware of, helping them see them, and then most importantly, releasing them and replacing them with things that are beneficial to them rather than the things that are holding them back. So that would be my superpower.
And I think that's something that we all can relate with, where we've got that one person where you watch them screw the same thing up over and over and over again, and it's like, what's wrong? There's something that is not right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people may not be able to put their finger on it, but there might be something, that just is blocking them from doing any progress forward in that one specific thing. And no matter how much you teach them, it's not going to happen, right?
Exactly. And I think we all have those friends too that we've seen, like, just please stop doing this one thing, or you got to see this, or you got to see that. And look, it's always easier to live somebody else's life from the outside. But what really got me was, you give advice to people and you'd help them, and you could see they wanted to help. They wanted to take that advice in, but they had the blocks, they had the internal stresses, they had dual beliefs, they had a whole bunch of things inside of them that they weren't aware of themselves. And when you're not aware of it, it's really hard to change. So it's kind of like, you can't pick the food out of your teeth unless somebody tells you there's food in your teeth, because you may have got used to it being there. And sometimes you need that mirror in front of you just to do it, for the help to do it. So I'm kind of that person pointing out those things and holding up the mirror sometimes to, depending on the situation. And that's really how I'm helping people, is find those things that they're like, you've been in 7 relationships and each time the same thing has happened. Maybe it's you. Or, like,
you need to look at this.
yeah, maybe it's not everybody else on the planet. Maybe it's something inside of you that you're putting out. Maybe it's a lesson you need to learn. There's various levels with this stuff. And I try to meet people where they're at, because I find that that's just so much more impactful to help people, rather than say like, well, you need to, you're bad with money, so you need to come up with a savings plan. That's a tactic that doesn't help you. I mean, it does, but you need to have the mindset and the beliefs in the background that are running on the right frequency for you to start doing those things.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've watched in my family. We were talking in kind of previously in about generational issues, and I watched it with my dad. His dad was always having a car repoed at some point. He was trying to be an entrepreneur, and it just wasn't working. And it was one of those situations where, looking back on, I never knew him, but looking back on it and hearing the stories behind it, I think he had no idea. Like you said, he had all these tactics around him, but no strategy to actually implement them. And I think that's one of the things. And I saw it with my dad as well, where it's like, you think different. And so maybe the traditional stuff doesn't really work, or there's a major block. I think there's a block going on there, but it's one of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, when you look at people, a lot of times when they're not having success with something, or they're not where they want to be, often there's fundamental lacking emotional issues, or emotions or values inside of themselves that they've either taken on or they've never been exhibited. So they don't really know what to do. And Worthiness is a big one that seems to come up right off the bat with a lot of my clients, is that they don't feel worthy. And it's, we go through 12 years of school that reinforces you need to be perfect to be good, to be celebrated, to be wonderful. And the second you don't have, like, I don't know about you, but if you got like 98 on 100% on 100, 98% on something, the question I got asked was, well, what about the other 2%? Not way to go for the 98%, because it's 98%. That was a lot of studying
Yeah.
to get to that point.
Yeah.
But we don't look at it like that. And that's kind of human nature. So, we don't learn these worthiness things unless somebody is actively teaching us. And even if somebody is teaching us, we have to be the ones that internalize that. So if you take on something really early in life that is, you know, um, you have to do this for me to like you, or you have to give me this for this other thing to happen, you learn a very backwards way of what it is to be worthy and to love yourself and to feel love from others. And these are all, I know these aren't like necessarily businessy type things, but this is what a lot of us go through. We're like constantly trying to prove ourselves. And I've been through that too, where you're like, no, if I have a six pack, then everybody will like me. Nothing changed there.
Yeah.
If I run this marathon, if I make $1 million, if I do this, then I should feel this way and I should get this from someone else.
Mhm.
And what we find is that you need to be able to give it to yourself. And that's the really hard part in the beginning, because we don't know how to do that for ourselves. We don't know how to nurture ourselves. We're just so busy trying to live on the outer layer of proving ourselves that we're worthy, that we forget to tell ourselves, you know what, you were born worthy. And that is a much more impactful place to start.
Exactly. And I think I see a lot of people that will do that where they will one of the things I've learned about entrepreneurship is that if you come in with any sort of personal issues, they are going to be amplified and you're going to have to deal with them.
Yeah. Yep.
This is not for the weak. It is like
Oh,
the ultimate personal development. And I think a lot of people will have this intensity because not either they're battling these massive things and they need the intensity to keep going forward on it, or it's also to block a lot of these issues that they're just not facing. They want to face it, so they're going to they're going to work a gajillion hours. Like another guest of mine used the term the cult of busy, and I think that is a perfect term for this.
great
And
expression.
by stepping back and saying, okay, what do I need to heal to be able to do it? And healing is not a weakness. Healing is actually a strength.
It's a
You know,
superpower.
it is, because once you've healed all of that stuff, things get a hell of a lot easier. And I just speaking from experience, they get a hell of a lot easier, and you're actually more effective once you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You owe it to yourself to be healed, to heal yourself. And I was talking with somebody yesterday, and what came out was you need to, most of us don't feel that we're worthy enough to go down that healing path, or we're afraid or whatever. But the underlying theme is that I don't think I deserve to feel better than how I'm feeling right now. So I'm going to go seek it through social media, alcohol, achievement. There's no limit to the things you can do outside of yourself. But to truly take that time to reflect inwards and go, I'm really sick of this feeling. I'm really sick of, like, you know, getting the new sale and having that nice little dopamine hit and then feeling like crap 5 minutes later because the chase is over and now I need something else. It's kind of it's kind of like you're raising your own level to be like, this good thing happened and it's going to end and that's fine, but I'm still okay. Whereas I think a lot of us are so below the value, our worthiness line, that when we have those things, the drop is so detrimental to us that we look at it and it's like, what is going on here? Why doesn't this feel the way I think it's going to feel the whole time I'm chasing after it? So it's
Yeah.
much more about finding a way to be the best version of yourself on an ongoing basis. And you still have those moments, but they're not as bad because you know who you are and you know it's just part of it. And I've had those this week. I have the ups and downs. Everybody does. And when you can kind of go like, well, no, this isn't, if something bad happens, you can look at it and go, okay, that sucks. The client let me go. The person can't hang out. This thing gets canceled, whatever. But I'm still a good person. I know my value. I know I'm worthy, rather than the old way, which may be to go like, well, now I've got to go get 5 more clients and I'm going to show you and I'm going to do this and that. And it's just not, it's a much more toxic way of being, but we don't see it because we're not going to do that mirror work, the inner work that needs to be done.
Absolutely. So let's pivot for a second and hear, because I always love to hear the backstories, the origin stories of how you got to this point.
Okay.
So you've been a serial entrepreneur. You are a CPA, and what was that story? Go as deep as you'd
Yeah,
like. Do it just so we can hear what that path was like. What is the series of events that brought you to where you're at?
sure. I'm happy to share it. So my parents were on Krypton and the planet was dying. And wrong origin story. Okay. My origin story. So my origin story is I grew up in a home with an autistic sister.
Mm,
And when I was very young, she tried to kill me because she wasn't in control of her faculties.
okay.
And I'm going to go really fast through this story just for the sake of brevity here, but there's lots there, obviously. Anyway, that whole experience taught me that I needed to be safe. So
Mm,
accounting was safe.
mhm,
And I put all those traumatic events in my emotional garage. And I was like, okay, I'm a dude. I'm going to put them on a shelf. I think about them. They're gone. They're done. And I kept getting sicker. So I kind of lived life by going, if I make everybody like me, if I play the game safe, if I do all the things that people are telling me to do, get the job, the car, the house, pay off the house, all these things, then I'm going to be happy. And I did all that. And I got sicker and sicker afterwards because I wasn't living my purpose and I wasn't dealing with the emotional garage that was getting moldier and moldier. So this all came to a head a few years ago, and I was going through, I'm getting emotional here. Wow. Um, and I had basically gone down to water for a while to like try to figure out what the food was that was maybe giving me such bad indigestion.
mhm,
And it came to a head that I needed to deal with this. And I didn't want to do talk therapy, which had kind of been my blog. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I didn't want to go talk about things for weeks and months and years and maybe not have any kind of breakthrough. So my acupuncturist who was helping with this stuff said, have you tried EMDR? And that's eye movement desensitization reprogramming. And you basically go into a room, go through a traumatic experience, you relive it, and you tear down the Jenga tower of your belief, and then you rebuild it with something more serving and positive.
mhm,
And I did that. And the first day I felt amazing. I felt like I had just, like I could feel things changing in my brain, as weird as that sounds.
yeah,
And that got me realizing that, okay, maybe there's something here. And then so I went through a lot of the traumatic events and, recovering and feeling safe and all these things. And then I'd have sessions where I walked out and I was great. I had sessions where I couldn't lift my feet up to get in my car. I would sleep in my car afterwards.
mhm,
And I couldn't understand this because as the accountant, I'm looking at this going like, this doesn't make sense. You're feeling one way one time, you're feeling another way another time. But I went through it and I felt so much better after the fact. And then somebody suggested that I do Reiki. And I asked, what's that? And, the same explanation. It's kind of hard to describe, but I think it would be good for you. So, give it a try. So I go to Reiki for the first time and this lady does her thing and she says, your sacral chakra was in a cage and we've freed it. So you might feel tired. Now, at this point, it's Saturday morning and I'm kind of going, I don't understand what a chakra is or anything like energy healing to me at this point is like, I'll give it a try. I mean, I don't know what it's not probably not going to do anything.
mhm,
So Saturday morning, she's telling me you might feel a little tired today. I went home and went to bed and didn't wake up till Monday morning for work. I
mhm,
slept like I've never slept before because so much had happened energetically that I just didn't understand. And then the next thing that happened was she said, well, you should try theta healing. And I said, what's that? She's like, well, it's kind of, you might have blocks in your life about things, either mentally or in your aura or physically, and they can help you release it. So I showed up at my first theta healing session, same thing as all the other ones. What are you here for? I don't really know. Well, what's calling to you to work on today? And I took a quick thought and I'm like, well, I don't really feel abundant. I mean, like my house is paid off, I'm doing well, but I've never felt abundant or like even, safe financially. And so we worked on that. We released these beliefs. We brought in new ones, as you do with in a session. You do muscle testing to find where the root cause is, which is the big thing. And then like within a couple of months after that, I had won a trip to anywhere in the world with $1,000. Like, and I was just like blown away by this. And in case anybody listening is wondering, I've never won a 50-50 when I've owned both tickets. So, like
Yeah.
it's just the way it goes. So things were changing. And the only thing I could start to see is that as I changed the internal energy and external energy around me and my beliefs and everything, my life started to radically change to the point where it's been a couple of years with all of this. And it's just, uh, miraculous doesn't even begin to define it, because it's just, the me of 4 years ago would never have believed any of this, but here we are. And I think that starts to happen when you start to empty out the emotional garage, deal with the shadow backpack and all this other stuff. You're telling the universe, look, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to deal with it. And things start to happen more for you, has been my, when you start to be more authentic, more things start to happen that align for you.
And it's funny. So ever since I was a kid, I always had this idea that there sick people was because of a block somewhere. And
Mhm.
it's not, it's very much not blaming sickness on people. What it is that this is a manifestation of something else in your life.
Right.
And it was something that, back then nobody had any idea what this was.
Right.
It's a little bit more accessible now, but it was like, just, every person I saw who was sick was also angry and had massive issues that they weren't dealing with. And it
Yeah.
was really clear. And so I think that there is something to it. I think, that it's one of the basis for a lot of the entrepreneurs I see are religious for reasons. And I think that we all have this belief in something that we can't see, but we know is there, and it
Right.
just manifests differently. Each person has their own words for it. Each person has their own terminology for it, but it's something that it's tapping into, as in Think and Grow Rich, infinite intelligence, tapping into that and being able
Yeah.
to say, and now have the ability to move it. So it's just something different flavor, same thing.
Yeah, I think like, I mean, people use God, collective intelligence, universal intelligence. Like there's a lot of words around it. A lot of them can be triggering to people because they don't, uh, you say the word God to one person, it means one thing, and to another, it means something very, very different. So
Hmm.
to me, I just kind of always looked at it as universal energy. And I agree with you. Like, I think a lot of times when we're sick with something, we're holding something in, there is a release that needs to happen. And dude, accountant, come on. Like, this is not normal stuff for me. This is not. So I'm looking at all of this and kind of going like, this doesn't make sense, but here we are. And, like the path just kept unfolding very, very naturally and organically without asking or pushing for things. And it still is like, like things just keep happening that I'm like, wow, I needed this and this happened. And, sometimes it's not as obvious, but other times like it's like, oh, like something happened with your flight and then suddenly you get like $1,000 flight voucher because of that, just when you're going like, oh, I really wanted to go on another trip but I don't have the money to do it, and suddenly this happens. So I think a big part of it is just changing your view to, I'm healing but I'm also doing the work, and the universe is rewarding me. And it may not feel like a reward. It really didn't feel like it was a reward on in January when I was sleeping on a bench in the Toronto airport, but it
Yes.
really did feel like a reward when I used those tickets to go to Atlanta in the spring. So, it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to happen. And that's the hardest part, is to let go and go, look, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
So it's a roller coaster sometimes, I'm not going to lie, but it's kind of fun too.
And I think as entrepreneurs, that's one thing that we're good at, is being able to say, look, I don't care what's going to happen. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And, and if you try to control it, it's not going to work. I've seen a lot of people try to go that route as well. But once you learn that it's like, look, I have the ability, I have the power to be able to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure this out no matter what happens. And there's an amount of freedom. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that whole thing about airlines, because I had that happen in January.
Okay.
Exact thing.
Wait, were you the guy sleeping next to me in the airport? No, I'm just kidding.
If you were in Baltimore, yes, but
No.
I was on a flight. They said, we're overbooked. We need 3 volunteers, and something in the back of my head goes, go, go do this. And so I've learned to listen to those shouts, and I call call it the 2x4 of consciousness, just kind of bashes you upside the head and says, you need to do this. And so, yeah, they ended up giving me, I think it was twice what I had paid for the tickets round trip and then paid for the next 2 trips that I was saying.
Wow. That's a
So,
lot.
yep,
That's awesome. Good for you.
it was great.
Yeah.
It was
Uh,
great. And it was mildly inconvenienced, but actually ended up my Airbnb wasn't going to be ready till the afternoon. So I was like 3 hours late, which was exactly how long it needed to happen. So this does actually work.
Yeah, and there you go. It's like it's just looking at those things and going like, I wonder. You come at things with a curious optimism where it's like when something happens, instead of going, why does this happen to me? You go,
Mhm.
why is this happening for me right now? I can't wait
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
see what it is. And I think my biggest block early on was that I thought it had to be this massive thing. It's like, oh, this means I'm going to win the lottery. No, it just means that you're going to avoid something or something else is going to happen to you. Um, but life's way better when you get excited about those things. You're like, wow, rather than, ugh, this
Yeah.
sucks.
Yes. And there are times when it does suck. I mean, that's kind of part of things. And I
Right.
think it's part of the process. But if you trust the process and just go, look, this is teaching me something for better.
Yeah.
It's either teaching me a skill that I need to be able to teach other people. It's teaching me a skill that I need to level up. It's teaching me something like that. If you go into it as a learning mode versus going into it as the suck, totally different mindset.
Yeah, I
And
agree
it
with
helps a lot,
you.
and you end up getting more from it. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Help
look
you
at
as
it
a
and you're like, what is this? What is happening to teach me? When a bad thing happens, it's happening to you for a reason. So find the reason and so you don't repeat it again. If nothing else, that's a great reason to learn it. It's like, uh, like I said earlier about the guy who's gone through 7 relationships that end the same way. You maybe you go like, yeah, I don't want to do this whole process again, so I'm going to learn from this, even though it sucks, even though it wasn't how I designed it to be, but I trust that things are happening for a reason, and something bigger and better is coming my way because of it.
Yeah, and it's funny. My mom was a psychologist, so very much science based, and has she's getting more and more into the energy side of things as she gets older, but was not. This
Yeah,
was one of those things where it's like, I'm going to try it. Oh, wait, it worked.
yeah,
Not a believer at first. She
yeah.
just sort of went
In
on
there.
blind faith for a bit, right? But it's funny. She was saying the other day, she's like, some of this stuff is generational, and she thinks it's genetic, and
Yeah,
it passes down from person to person to person to person.
yeah,
There's some research behind that too that's coming out that says there is a genetic component to some of this, which I
absolutely.
think is really interesting. And so when you're healing you, you're not just you're healing yourself. There's other, it's not a failure in you. It's that you've got other things coming on, which may be inherited. Like my dad was terrible with money. His dad was terrible with money. And so of course I inherited it.
Yeah.
So now I get to deal with it, but it's my, my gift. I don't
Well,
know.
and I mean, you're saying that and you're an action taker, so you're able to go, okay, and I'm going to heal this rather than what so many others of us do, which is look at those things like, well, dad was bad with money, grandpa was bad with money, I'm bad with money, the end.
Mhm.
That's not the same thing. It's being able to look at these situations that happen, and we work on that in theta healing. With like you hold beliefs in your core area, which is like your life experiences, your genetics, which is your genes. There's a social aspect that you can hold things like just what I'm trying to think of anything societal, like rich people are lazy or greedy or whatever like that. So that's like a belief that might be all three of those things, but there's a social consciousness around different things. And then you have your soul that you might have beliefs on too that you need to heal or release or replace. And we work with all of those because a lot of the time, I think most of us know when we have something conscious, like we have the story behind it, right? Like I'm bad with money because dad was bad with money and I saw that every day. So that's how I am. But it's different when you're like, I don't know why I have a fear of water and it makes no sense. And that's when you can start going like, well, genetically, like your great grandma had a fear of water and that got handed down to you for whatever reason. And again, accountant saying this, it all sounds kind of wild, but like you said, science is starting to see these things, and I think we're living at a really cool time where we're gonna discover a whole bunch of different modalities and ways of healing, and just why we are the way we are. And once you can figure that out, you can start healing it. And the why doesn't have to be pointing to a specific person, place, or thing and going, this thing happened, that's why I'm this way. It's just going, I feel this way and I don't want to, so I need to be able to release it and heal from it.
And here's the cycle that's happened over and over again. I need to be able to
Yeah,
break that. And here's that one key that's stopping it. And it usually is like one or two keys, and then bam, it's done. It's not as
exactly.
hard as it sounds, but it takes a mindset shift to be able to do it, at least from my experience. So I do want to have a chance for you to say what the 5-year you is. So I want a chance to be able to do that, because we can go on for hours on this. But it sounds
Yeah,
like
for sure. And I'm happy to come back to it if you want. Because our talks have been good. They've been great today and the other day too when we were chatting before we recorded. 5-year You is the company my partner and I have started, and it is designed to help you become the best version of yourself over 5 years. We do this we have a home study kit, and you basically you discover your soul's purpose, and we call it living from the inside out, where most of us are living from the outside in. And the outside is what we were talking about before, like the accomplishments, the money, the acknowledgement that comes from society on what we're doing. Whereas starting from the inside is going, okay, I'm here to help people communicate, heal, create, invent. This is what I'm here to do. And then when you know your soul's purpose, then you grow from the inside outwards. And then you start thinking, okay, well, how do I want to be physically? How do I want to be emotionally? How do I want to be spiritually? And we work on these things, and you become conscious of creating this life of who you really want to be. And once you know who you are, then the right people can show up and show up authentically, because you're showing up authentically. And the right people start to show up all the time. You're a great instance of this, right? Like, we didn't know each other this time last week, but here we are.
exactly.
And the right people show up, you're able to do these things, and then you start to create a life in the fourth layer, which is all about a lifestyle that you want, not based on what you want to have, but the life you want to live. So I think a lot of us, when we think of our lives, we really are materialistic, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's looking at it and going like, hey, well, if I want a Tesla, then I need to work so many hours, which means I need to find a job that's going to pay me so many hours to get the Tesla. And then you're like, I'm too busy to ever drive this car, so I just spent all this time getting this thing that I can't enjoy. So by flipping it on its head and starting from who you are and what you want in life, you get to decide how you want to show up in your relationships, what kind of relationships you want. You get clear on you. And then the lifestyle and the accolades and the acknowledgments, they still happen, but they come from a place of, like we said, you have that higher baseline, you have that worthiness, you know who you are. And so if you get a Tesla and nobody ever acknowledges it, not a big deal. If
Mhm.
you have I hear so many people that have gone through the cottage syndrome. I don't know if you guys call it cottage, cabin, lake house, whatever it is, where it's like, "Oh, I just want to sit at the lake, and so I'm gonna work really hard for this lake house." But you're working so hard, you actually never get to the lake house because you you went the outside in, and you didn't recognize that you were doing this until you kind of get to it, and you're like, wow, I did a lot of work to have this thing that I never get to use because I still got to work to have this thing. So by going from the inside out, you start to create a life of purpose. And when you live your life on purpose, life changes for you from in a million ways. And that's coming from experience. Again, accountant to energy healer.
Bit divergent.
A little bit.
Just a little. So, as we wrap things up, I do have one question I ask of every person, and that is, what is one book or podcast that has had a major impact on your life that you'd like to share with the audience?
The book that's had the most impact on my life, it came out in the 2000s. It's T. Harv Eker's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind.
Mhm.
And there's a little bit of money tactics in there, but it's all about mindset and how rich people think versus poor people think. And what I really liked about it is that that was the first thing I had seen that had affirmations and like just a plan. So if you're kind of new to getting good with money and affirmations and stuff like that, it's very grounded, and it was really, really useful. Everybody that I talk to, that's the first book I always say. It changed my life in a million ways.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the wisdom you've shared with us all.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Andrew, check out the link in the description.